Well, good evening, everyone. This is John Craig, and I'm your host this evening for Walking in Spirit and Truth here out of Amarillo, Texas on the LambNetwork.tv and also at the Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel. And it's great to be with you on another evening. So I hope you all are doing well. And shalom to Joe and Tammy already there in the chat room. It's good to see you on this wonderful day. It's a beautiful day in the Panhandle of Texas. And all I can say is that the last week's single digits and zero temperatures that we're having are just one of those things that help you really appreciate days like today, when it was beautiful. I'm going to say pre-spring weather, but absolutely gorgeous. It was in the lower 80s where I was at. Can you believe that? From 0 to 80 degrees in 1 week time span. And it was an absolute delight. So it's just, it's great to be alive, and it's great to be here walking in spirit and truth. And who are we? It is, well, my wife and I, pastor Life of Worship Ministries here in Amarillo, Texas. And we would love for you to always join us if you're ever around, ever in the area, to come by and so we can hug your neck and say hi. And because Amarillo is on the way. Yeah, if you're like passing through from Denver to Dallas or vice versa, Oklahoma City to Albuquerque, any which direction, even heading down towards Lubbock or up from Lubbock and heading north, Amarillo is the hub for this part of the state. So you can always come by, stop by, join us for our Shabbat services, which are at noon for the Torah portion, noon Central Time. We do our Torah portion. It's online for a couple hours. Also, of course, live. You can come in person, and that's 12 p.m. Central Time on Shabbat, and then followed up by what we call our encounter service, which begins at 3 p.m. Central Time, where we have a time of praise, worship, ministry time, and followed up with an inspirational message and maybe some other special things as well. So anyway, those are some things that are going on, and we would love to have you and have you join us. By the way, this ministry, of course, is able to continue on because of your sponsorship. And so with your tithes, your offerings, your love gifts that you give, and your partnerships, actually, you can give online to help support this ministry by going to www.lifeofworshipministries.org. I'm sorry, lifeofworshipamarillo.org. I got to put it up because we have the YouTube channel, which is Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel, but we have lifeofworshipamarillo.org, and there it is on the bottom of your screen. You can see that, where you can go online and click the donate button if you have the opportunity to give online that way, or you can go to our website and find our mailing address if that would work better for you. Anyway, either way, we certainly appreciate that. And we appreciate the financial partners and prayer partners that join us all across the country, all across the continent, all across the world, that are all part of our family here at Life of Worship. Well, with that said, have you guys been enjoying the journey of Enoch? Do you remember what we talked about this last week in Enoch, where we were actually reviewing? We were still in the middle of this vision that Enoch was telling his son Methuselah, and he had this vision when it was before he met or before he married Methuselah's mother, and he calls her Edna. Isn't that interesting? How many times do we actually see the wife's name in Scripture? And yet here in the book of Enoch, we did get to find that out. So he's talking about these visions that he had, and that these were just like downloads. And as we've been going through these downloads, one of the things that I think have been very interesting is how it parallels the unfolding of things like the Exodus. Well, no, even before that, like, for example, Noah and his large ship that he had, and his sons. And there's these analogies of calling the people that are within this family sheep, and anybody that's not outside of the family, they were called by other animal names like wolves or what else did they use? Donkeys, swine. They called them foxes. they called them a whole bunch of different type of animal names, and wild boars. That was some of them. Dogs. These are all different names for people that are outside of the family, but the family is always called sheep. And then how Yahweh would raise up sheep to lead the sheep, and then the sheep would become a man. And so we have a lot of metaphorical language and leaders of the flock, and we do get this picture of Moses as being a leader of the flock. We get a picture of even King Saul and King David, and possibly even King Solomon, that are come out of this review of some of the leadership. And then it talked about the 70 leaders of the sheep, and that would overseers of the sheep, like shepherds of the sheep or pastors, or perhaps you can call them the 70 elders of Israel. And that they were even said that, some of the sheep would die under their oversight, but that would be okay, because there would be an allowance for some of the sheep to pass away, but that these 70 would find themselves corrupted, and that they would even allow more than the allotted amount of sheep to die. So that's also kind of interesting, because when you go back and you look in the history of what had happened in Israel, how many people were murdered, killed, assassinated, and rounded up, imprisoned, like Yochanan, the immerser, he was imprisoned. Different people, different leaders, different people that we know of. Stephen would be one that we would recognize as one that was imprisoned and then brought out and then stoned. Yeah, these were not allowed. And what we read last week, that there would be a sefer, there would be a scroll that would document the sheep that died that were outside of the allotment and who was responsible for it. So guess what? There would be some type of judgment that would take place. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about. And now we're still on chapter 88. And we've gotten all the way up to verse 105. Yeah, it's taken us a little bit of time to go here, but it has been interesting. It's been very enlightening. It's been showing us some different things. So we've been taking our time at it, because it's really kind of reflecting our history of our Hebraic heritage, our Hebraic roots, the some of the foundations and the history in a prophetic sense that Enoch is telling. He's telling his son Methuselah. So now that's where we are. We're going to verse 105. So, all right, so here you go. If you've got your book of Enoch, Hanok, opened up, and you can read along with me, and we're just going to pick it up and continue with this adventure, because we don't have far to go. It's only until we're ready to jump into chapter 89. Let's see how far we can get today. So, verse 105, more, however, than was ordered, everyone killed and destroyed. Let's back up a couple verses. So it'll kind of lead into 105. So let's start at 103. Neither was I afterwards able to perceive whether they again entered that house. The shepherds likewise and their associates delivered them to all the wild beasts, that they might devour them. Each of them in his season, according to his number, was delivered up. Each of them, one with another, was described in a sefer. How many of them, one with another, were destroyed in a sefer? Now, they weren't destroyed in a sefer. It was just in the sefer. It records how they were destroyed, how they were delivered up, and how it was a process. And you can see that there was corruption among the shepherds and their associates. In other words, they got people to do the dirty work. For example, we talked about this last week, Shaul, right? Shaul, before his conversion, and he got papers from the elders in Jerusalem to go down to Damascus. And we had a whole discussion about Damascus and how this was considered the Damascus area around the Qumran area close to the Dead Sea. And that is where he got knocked off his high horse and was blinded and had his Amazing conversion. And so 105. More, however, than was ordered, everyone killed and destroyed. Then I began to weep and was greatly indignant on account of the sheep. In like manner, also I saw in the vision him who wrote, how he wrote down one destroyed by the shepherds every day. He ascended, remained, and exhibited each of his sephirim to Yahweh of the sheep, all which they had done, and all which each of them had made away with. Wow. So this I think is also an interesting note, because he was aware of that whoever this scribe is, it must be some type of, perhaps some type of angel, a messenger of Yahweh that is watching, and that's his assignment. And he's taking notes, and he's writing them down. But the thing that is most impressive to me is that he takes them before Yahweh, and it seems like he takes it to Yahweh. Here's the documentation, opens up the scroll, and to like right away. I mean, there's no delay. It's not like it's a monthly reporting, or even a weekly reporting. It's like, okay, here's a reporting. There's one more down. And the way it sounds like, he just didn't write down the names. He wrote down the manner by which they were destroyed. So I would think that that would actually go back into the very discussions and the intent and the planning for the destroying of these sheep. Seems kind of, I mean, it seems like that would be the kind of the process. And he's writing the narrative all the way up to the point of where the sheep is destroyed, and perhaps how they disposed of that sheep, and then maybe how they even wrote a narrative as to what happened. So when people have a question like, so and so was just executed by the 70 elders, and then they say, oh no, he was just out wandering after dark and the wolves got him, some type of narratives. I'm like, no, wait a minute. It was documented. The angel wrote it down. Makes you think. Doesn't it make you think, like, perhaps even now, like we see innocent people, and we see innocent people that face a judgment, especially the weaponization of our government against so many different people during the prior administration. And some of that's still going on. They're still trying to snuff it out and set people free and all that. How many people? Don't be discouraged, as if you come under some type of persecution that is like a weaponization of the Justice Department or whatever, and there's that lawfare against that there is still an angelic accounting, and Yahweh's taking notice. He's reading everything about it. Pretty interesting thought, because if he did it here, I would think that we're still talking about sheep. How far into the future is Enoch talking about? I mean, was it just like going up until the time of the second and third century before Messiah, or in that first century time, and then there's no more oversight into it? Or perhaps because there's still sheep, and there's still sheep in Yah's kingdom, and the sheep are still getting eaten, still getting destroyed, and he's still taking an accounting of it. And destroying a sheep may not necessarily mean a loss of life. It could just simply be the assassination of one's character, of their name, of their livelihood, of their standing in the community, and or within the congregation itself. I mean, I think Pastor Sandi and I could write a book about how sheep eat their shepherds. Anyway, let's move on from that. Okay, so it's just some things I was kind of thinking about. It's very interesting that is this just limited to whatever this time frame that Enoch was giving, or is he giving a principle in this metaphorical language as to how Yah actually oversees? Because he's paying attention to every tear drop because of our circumstances. So just a thought. Hey, just want to give a shout out to Lou. I see you there in the chat as well. Saw you pop in. And so it's great to see you. Moving on right along. Verse 110. After this, I saw shepherds overlooking for 12 hours. I saw shepherds overlooking for 12 hours. And behold, 3 of the sheep departed, arrived, went in, and then began building all which was fallen down of that house. But the wild boars hindered them, although they prevailed not. Again they began to build as before, and raised up that tower, which was called a lofty tower. And again they began to place before the tower a table, and with every impure and unclean kind of bread upon it. Okay, wait. We got to stop right here. First off, we had one tower that was beautiful, and it was built up, and we talked about that being the temple, and it looked like it could have been the first temple. And then we have this, but it was destroyed. It was torn down. And we talked about how it was, Nebuchadnezzar had come in and destroyed that temple. And now we have 3 sheep that go out, and they begin building another lofty tower. Well, can we say perhaps Nehemiah and Ezra and what about okay, I'm gonna look it up over in the book of Zechariah, because I think Zechariah talks about that, and so I'm going to go there right now and see what it says. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, what about this? I mean, it could have been like, Zechariah is reporting. He was the prophet. He's right. Of course, he was the author of the book. What we see of the book of Zechariah, and yet he points out or is discussing these things with Joshua the high priest, and talks about who that is. And also, let me go on. I'm going to find it. I'm trying to find Zerubbabel. Yeah, the king. And who were charged with making sure that the temple was rebuilt, is the way, if I remember right. There's a lot that's going on in this book, of course. A lot of end times eschatology things that are spoken about in here. Did a lot of studying on it, but yeah, Joshua and Zerubbabel and Zechariah is encouraging him to finish the work. Yeah, because it's over in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 16. Therefore, thus says Yahweh, I will return to Jerusalem with compassion. My house will be built in it, declares Yahweh of hosts, and a measuring line will be stretched over Jerusalem. And so we have this whole process that's discussed about the building of this temple. And some would say, well, what temple is he talking about? Well, I think in the contemporaries of Zechariah and Haggai and Zerubbabel and the high priest Yahushua, it says here in the summary of the book of Zechariah, it says Zechariah and Haggai both preached at the first generation after the return of Judah from the Babylonian exile. In 536 BC, the temple foundation was laid, but due to local opposition, the work was discontinued for 16 years. In 520 BC, Yah raised up these 2 prophets to stir up the nation to complete the rebuilding of the temple. Many of the economic hardships which the people had experienced since they returned were caused by the fact that with no temple in operation, the land was still polluted from their former sins and would not produce well. response to Zechariah and Haggai's preaching was immediate and complete. By 515 BC, the temple was finished and in operation again. So there you go. That's kind of a little bit of a summary with that. And we know that even in the rebuilding of the walls and the rebuilding of the temple, we know that there was opposition to it. So to them in doing that. So it seems like that perhaps that we have this prophetic word about the rebuilding of the second temple. Second temple there in the in 5. What did it say? 520, around 520 to 518 BC. So that is really pretty amazing to me. It's very interesting. 515 BC, the temple was finished. Okay, there you go. That's the word. So by the way, I see, hey Al, I see you checking in there. It's great to have you with us and Irene this evening. So shalom, shalom. So it says here, and behold, 3 of the sheep departed. So 3 of the sheep departed, arrived, went in, and began building all which is fallen down in that house. So who was it? I mean, was it Ezra? Was it Nehemiah? Was it Zerubbabel? Was it the high priest Joshua? Is Zechariah, included in that? Which out of those names, which are the 3? I think Ezra would be considered one of them, and perhaps Joshua and Zerubbabel. Maybe those are the 3. But going on, it says, but the wild boars hindered them, although they prevailed not. Again, they began to build as before and raised up that tower, which was called a lofty tower. And again, they began to place before the tower a table. Now this kind of blows my mind, because like, okay, what are they talking about? And maybe what was happening spiritually during the second temple period. Again, they began to build, to place before the altar a table with every impure and unclean kind of bread upon it. Now, what do you think of unclean bread? I mean, was it dipped in pig fat? I don't know. It says, moreover, also, all the sheep were blind and could not see, as were the shepherds likewise. Thus were they delivered up to the shepherds for a great destruction, who trod them underfoot and devoured them. Yet was there Adonai silent, until all the sheep in the field were destroyed. The shepherds and the sheep were all mixed together, but they did not save them from the power of the beast. Then he who wrote the Sefer ascended, exhibited it, and read it at the residence of Yahweh, of the sheep. He petitioned him for them and prayed, pointing out every act of the shepherds and testifying before him against them all. Then, taking the Sefer, he deposited it with him and departed. So it also kind of makes me think about, during the Second Temple period, it was during the Hellenist invasion, right? It's when Antiochus Epiphanes, it was when Alexander the Great had come in and took a great part of that, the territory of the, the land made the empire stretched out all the way to the Euphrates. And then, of course, he died. He was very young when Alexander died. And it was split between the 4 generals. And then of the 4 generals, and we had the northern and the southern kingdoms that were battling against each other. And the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid empires, I believe is what it was. And then, of course, that's where we get the Antiochus series of leaders, Antiochus Epiphanes. And they came in. What did they do? The table, the altar, and they sacrificed a pig on it. And yet there remained in place a substitute priesthood, not the legitimate priesthood, as we know that the sons of Zadok would be the legitimate priesthood from the proper line of Eleazar. And but they being exiled, part of it they left, and part of it is they were not allowed to come back. Okay, so but we saw that during that time that, there was this Hellenization of the people of the land, and many of them were giving up, their Hebraic traditions, their biblical traditions. They're just trying to blend in. They learned to do things like the Greeks would do. They learned to speak Greek. They took on Greek culture, because that's what a conquering empire wants to do, is establish a culture, their culture, because that's how they keep a culture. And if you can influence, therefore, the local priesthood, then you can and get them won over, or they will do your bidding. Then all of that influence can be controlled, or they can control their and influence the nation. So, but it was also during that time, people didn't want to comply. They wanted to keep Torah. They wanted to eat clean. They wanted to do the Torah portions. They wanted to do all of that. And when they weren't able to do that, what happened? They would be killed. They'd be executed. They'd be summarily executed. We reread over in Maccabees how even like there was this one family that had a bunch of children, and they killed all the children right in the side of the parents, and then they killed the parents. And I mean, it was horrific things. And that's how we got the half Torah portions, because they couldn't do the Torah portions, so they connected various writings and different books of the prophets, as connecting those with the Torah portion, so they'd read those and to remind them of the things that were in the Torah within the first 5 books of the Bible. So, there's a lot of different traditions that came out of that, just simply trying to preserve their culture. And yet we see that there was this partnership by the shepherds of Israel with these hedonistic, pagan, non-believing cultures. So, yeah. And then, of course, the angel, he wrote it all down in a book. So that is, some very interesting perspective. But wait, there's more, because now we are in chapter 89. We finally got out of 88, but guess what? There's an "and" in verse 1. So here we go. It says, "And I observed during the time that thus 37 shepherds were overlooking, all of whom finished in their respective periods as the first. Others then received them into their hands, that they might overlook them in their respective periods, every shepherd in his own period." In other words, there was always this changing of the guards, so to speak. As the shepherds would pass, they would get replacements. That's what it just seems like. As in terms of, they didn't all retire at one time and then a whole new crop came in. It seems like there was a kind of like transitioning into the new shepherds, is what I'm reading it to sound like. But nevertheless, it says every shepherd in his own period. Afterwards, okay, we're still in the visions. Afterwards, I saw in the vision that all the birds of heaven arrived. Eagles, the avis, kites, and ravens. The eagle instructed them all. They began to devour the sheep. What? Wait a minute. These birds of prey. These are birds of prey. These are birds that are that it's not only that they'll eat roadkill, but they'll go after live animals. Okay, that's what seems to be kind of the nature of these birds. And they arrive, so they began to devour the sheep. Who are these? Okay, we got to read more. And to peck out their eyes and to eat up their bodies. Wait a minute. So who is that? Is this a representation perhaps of is it a representation of another government? Who is this? Who's represented by the eagles? Well, it's, Rome had their what do you call them? Standards. Like when the Roman army would arrive, and they're one of the front writers would be holding a standard, and that standard would have an image, and I think they used an eagle. No, I could be wrong. Maybe we could look that up. A Roman army standard. Uh-oh. I didn't type that right. It's going to have a hard time. Standard. Well, what does that image show me? That image shows me, yeah, that. It does. Hey, I want to share this with you. You want me to share this with you? I mean, it just seems very interesting to me. I'll put it on the screen. Y'all can take a look at it. And let's see what we can do here. Take that, go here, and share it. And we're going to add it to stage, and we're going to view the file. And there it is. Look, there it is. It's an eagle. And it looks like some of these images have an eagle on them in one way or another. I don't know. It's just a thought. Tell me what you think. It's kind of so okay. So here these birds arrive, and they begin to pluck out their eyes, and they devour their flesh and all that sort of stuff. And okay, sorry, it's a little graphic, but it says the sheep then cried out, for their bodies were devoured by the birds. I also cried out. So I mean, he's actively involved in the vision. Enoch is completely involved in the vision. I also cried out and groaned in my sleep against the shepherd which overlooked the flock. Yeah, he dropped the ball. He's a shepherd's supposed to watch the flock, watch over the flock, make sure that they're taken care of, to look out after their welfare. And I looked while the sheep were eaten by. Wait a minute. I looked, and while the sheep were eaten up by the dogs, by the eagles, and by the kites, they neither left them their body, nor their skin, nor their muscles, until their bones alone remained, until their bones fell upon the ground. And the sheep became diminished. Yeah, I would say the flock be diminished from there. That's one way to. That's like a genocide, isn't it? Like just wiping out the flock. I observed likewise during the time that 23 shepherds were overlooking, who completed in their respective periods 58 periods. Then were small lambs born of those white sheep, who began to open their eyes and see, crying out to the sheep. The sheep, however, cried not out to them, neither did they hear, but they uttered. Neither did they hear what they uttered to them, but were deaf, blind, and obdurate. That's an interesting word, obdurate, in the greatest degree. I saw in the vision that ravens flew down upon those lambs. Wait a minute. Okay, I have to look something up now, because I need a definition. Obdurate, because I don't use obdurate in everyday language. Do you use the word obdurate? Does anybody use the word obdurate? I don't. So let's see what it says. It's an adjective, which means not changing in response to argument or other influence, obstinate or intractable, hardened in wrongdoing or wickedness, stubbornly impenitent, hardened against feeling, hard-hearted. Well, there you go. And it says, here's an example: an obdurate miser. How does it sound? Let's see. Obdurate. There you go. Obdurate. Okay, there's how you say it too. All right, so there's a word that means, it says, So the sheep, however, cried out, uh, not out to the sheep, however, cried not out to them, neither did they hear what they uttered to them, but were deaf, blind, and obdurate. They were hardened against feeling and hard hearted. Those are some bad sheep, those overseeing sheep, because they're blind. And Yeshua, how many times did Yeshua give the accusation, or even the other prophets, that these were deaf and blind sheep? And, like you're the blind leading the blind. And we know about the parties of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. I mean, they wouldn't hear the word of Yahweh. They wouldn't repent. And so these little sheep are crying out, and the others, the baby sheep was like, help, 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 help. Okay, never mind. And it says, I saw in the vision that ravens flew down upon those lambs, that they seized one of them, and that tearing the sheep in pieces, they devoured them. I saw also that the horns grew upon those lambs, and that the ravens lighted down upon their horns. I saw too that a large horn sprouted out on an animal among the sheep, and that their eyes were opened. So what's it mean when their eyes are open? In other words, they're understanding that. I think when one understands when one's eyes are open, is it means the eyes of their understanding are open. They understand now who they are. They find out who their identity, who they are in Messiah. They have an understanding of where they've come from, what their heritage is, and what their responsibility and accountability to the other sheep and to their flock or their congregation, or those that are like-minded, of like kind and like mind, that type of thing, all operating together as one. And so when we have that understanding, we have our eyes open, we can hear, we're hearing what Yahweh's speaking, we're seeing what Yahweh wants us to see, so that we're moving in the direction that he wants us to go, so that we can fulfill all the purposes that he's called us to. 89:14. He looked at them, their eyes were wide open, and he cried out to them. Then the Debella saw him. What? Then the Debella. Now, this is the first time we've had Debella. Then the Debella saw him, all of whom ran to him. And besides this, all the eagles, the avis, the ravens, and the kites were still carrying off the sheep, flying down upon them and devouring them. The sheep were silent. But the Debella lamented and cried out. What is a Debella? I got to find out what a Debella is. All right, so we're gonna go back over here to our definitions, and we're gonna find a Debella. What is a Debella? A Debella refers to a ram with a great horn, often associated with prophetic significance in certain religious texts. It can also be linked to themes of leadership and guidance within spiritual contexts. Okay, no, that way you can see it. You see that? It's probably kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Oh, not there. Not there. Okay. I'm using DuckDuckGo on there, and I don't know where to make it larger. Sorry. How about here? Yeah, I got it. And zoom and zoom in. Can you see it better? Okay. Just trying to make things easier for you. Okay. Do you want to hear Debella? How do you say Debella? It doesn't even say. It doesn't even give me a chance to push a button so you can hear it say Debella. Okay, never mind. Debella. I'm having fun with that. Okay, The debella, the debella. So that is a ram with a great horn, and often associated with prophetic significance in certain religious texts. So where are we talking? We're in a religious text. We're in Enoch, and it has prophetic significance. And it says the sheep were silent, but the debella lamented and cried out. Wow. Huh. Then the ravens contended and struggled with them, and they wished among them to break his horn, but they prevailed not over him. I looked on them until the shepherds, the eagles, the avis, and the kites came, who cried out to the ravens to break the horn of the debella, to contend with him and to kill him. But he struggled with them and cried out that they might come to him. So this is quite the ram. Is there a messianic discussion here? Is this a messianic um, reference? Maybe so. Verse 21, then I perceived that the man came who had written down the names of the shepherds and who ascended up before Yahweh of the sheep. He brought assistance and caused everyone to see him descending to the help of the debella. Oh, now isn't that interesting? Okay, so he's bringing the help from heaven. I think that's what he's talking about. There's a whole bunch of heavenly hosts descending to help the debella. Excuse me. I perceived likewise that Yahweh of the sheep came to them in wrath, while those who saw him fled away. All fell down in his tabernacle before his face, while all the eagles, the avis, the ravens, and the kites assembled and brought with them all of the sheep of the field. All came together and strove to break the horn of the debella. Then I saw that the man who wrote the sefer at the word of Yahweh opened the sefer of destruction of that destruction which the last 12 shepherds wrought, and pointed out before Yahweh of the sheep that they destroyed more than those who had preceded them. I saw also that Yahweh of the sheep came to them. I'm marking this out. Destroyed more than those who preceded him. I also saw that Yahweh of the sheep came to them, and taking in his hand the scepter of his wrath, seized the earth. Oh, I saw that Yahweh of the sheep came to them, and taking in his hand the scepter of his wrath, seized the earth, which became rent asunder, while all the beasts and the birds of heaven fell from the sheep and sunk into the earth, which closed over them. This is quite a prophetic text here. I saw too that a large sword was given to the sheep, who went forth against all the beasts of the field to slay them. But all the beasts and birds of heaven fled away from before their face. And I saw a throne erected in a delectable land. There's that word, delectable. Delectable. We talked about that before. Delectable. Let's just look that up so we can listen to it. Upon this sat Yahweh of the sheep, who received all the sealed sepharim, the sealed books, the sealed scrolls, which were opened before him. Then Yahweh called the first 7 white ones and commanded them to bring before him the first of the first stars. Oh, 7 white. So the 7 white sheep, the first 7 white sheep, to bring the first of the stars, which preceded the stars, whose form partly resembled that of horses. The first star, which fell down first, and they brought them all before him. And he spoke to the man who wrote in his presence, who was one of the 7 white ones, saying, take those 70 shepherds, to whom I delivered up the sheep, and receiving them, killed more of them than I commanded. Behold, I saw them all bound, standing before him. First came on the trial of the stars, which being judged and found guilty, went to the place of punishment. Wow, that's what it is. Now we've got this great white throne judgment that's going on. Did you get that hint as we were going through that, where it's talking about, Yahweh of the sheep came to them, and then taking his scepter of his wrath seized the earth, and it rent it asunder, and then all the beasts and the birds of heaven fell from the sheep and sunk in the earth. And then it says that, and I saw a throne erected in a delectable land, and Yahweh of the sheep, all who received all of them, is seated. I'm sorry, and Yahweh of the sheep, who received all the sealed Sepharim, which is open for him. So here's Yahweh, he's sitting on this throne, and he's judging. So now we've come to this some type of judgment. Now we've seen these different judgments throughout the book of Enoch, and so we have that eschatological kind of review, this connection all throughout, allusions to it, and visions of them, and discussions of it, and these things that Enoch has seen. And yet here's another discussion of a great white throne judgment. Don't you think that perhaps that as many times as this type of judgment that takes place, one first against those first angels that came upon the earth, the fallen ones, the watchers, and they go before the great throne first, and then we see the others following. Don't you think, as many times as it's been brought up in Enoch, that this is really significant before Yahweh, and he's given us these in these forms of the parables, the forms of this metaphorical language, idiomatic language, as well as visions, that in reality he's trying to tell us something. So I think this is something for us to really kind of maybe think about. It's pretty sobering. Do you ever go through and maybe read certain books or read certain things within Scripture, and our what is that? Our eternal perspective is reset. I mean, do you ever get those experiences where you there's something that happens in an encounter with Yahweh, and reading his word, or even reading a book about particular things, and it has such an impact that eternal perspective is reset? So it seems like even here in the book of Enoch, as we've been going through it, that there's multiple times that is causing us to stop and perhaps ponder and reset our eternal perspective. So it makes me think that way. And yeah, Tammy, I actually talked about that earlier in one of our prior episodes, about how some of the critics say that the book of Enoch was written during the silent years between the Tanakh and the Brit. And if so, did they know the book of Revelation? So, and how do they know the book of Revelation so well? I actually talked quite a bit about it before, but this is after reading through Enoch. I am personally thinking that, though it's possible, what happened in the library in Qumran is that they found copies of it, but I really believe that those are the copies that have been handed down, and the scrolls would only last for so long, so they'd have to recopy them again in order to preserve the writings. That I believe it goes all the way back to Enoch. And so when they do the dating of the scrolls that they found in the Qumran library and in other places, and they look at it and say, well, it seems to date around the second temple period. That yeah, that would be true, but they would be the copies of the copies of the copies that were handed down from the book of Enoch. That's my stance on it. And then from that, it gives us really the foundational revelations that we see expressed in other apocryphal books, as what we would see in the book of Zechariah, or the book of Daniel, in of course the book of Revelation, and even the things that Jude refers to. So even the things that Yeshua referred to. And I really think that there is a thematic connection, but I think it all is foundation upon this. And that's why I've just taken the stance that it goes all the way back to the time of Enoch prior to the flood, and it's just been handed down. And also, one of the things that we saw is that Enoch handed the scrolls to Noah. He specifically said he documented all of these different things and wrote them down in scrolls and gave them to Noah, and Noah put them on the ark. And so that's why I have that. That's why I have that position. So, so I'm going to hold to it. But it's always worth continuing to research. Okay, let's go on. And look at this. So we have this judgment. First came the trial of the stars, which, oh man, we're running out of time already, which being judged and found guilty went to the place of punishment. They thrust them into the deep, full of flaming fire and full of pillars of fire. Sounds like it's a hot place. Then the 70 shepherds were judged, and being found guilty, were thrust into the flaming abyss. Ooh. Ooh. Notice how it says into the deep, because I believe that it's not. Okay, into the deep. Of course, I'm very terrestrial minded because I live on planet Earth. Okay, but we know through the different things according to science and all of that, how in the depths of the earth, there's lava flows, there's magma flows, but all the way down to the core is just an intense amount of heat. And it says into this abyss, it would really make sense to me about this flaming realm. Very hot place I don't want to be. But the point is that it's not that it's just that their physical body is, because you know how the physical body is just dust to dust, but that the soul experiences the heat. At that time, likewise, I perceived that one abyss was thus opened in the midst of the earth, which was full of fire, and to this were brought the blind sheep, which being judged and found guilty, were all thrust into the abyss of fire on the earth and burnt. The abyss was on the right of that house, and I saw the sheep burning and their bones consuming. I stood beholding him emerge that ancient house, while they brought out its pillars, every plant in it, and the ivory enfolding it. They brought it out and deposited in a place on the right side of the earth. Okay. All right. Because we're running out of time. I want to pause right there. We'll pick it up in verse 39 next week. And it does remind me of that book, A Divine Revelation of Hell, that Mary K. Baxter, I think is Mary K. Baxter, Divine Revelation of Hell. I believe that's the author of the book. And she talks about all of these different compartments of hell, and that she visited over a 30-day period. And in these different compartments were different types of judgment that were going on. And the very fact that certain parts and realms of hell actually were meant for particular different types of people. And one of the places that she goes into great detail of is where the pastors were. And you think the pastors in hell, well, they're supposed to be preachers of righteousness, right? Well, there was a place reserved for them, and they were tormented a lot, really bad. I mean, like they were in, one description was like, if I remember right, they were in these coffin-like boxes, and these demonic characters were taking these spear-like things and then jabbing through the box to torment. And it was in this place of great heat. I mean, it was just pretty wild. And here in what we just read was just talking about how that to this in verse 35 were brought the blind sheep, being judged and found guilty, were all thrust into the abyss of fire in the earth. Should be pretty sobering for most of us. Pretty wild. But it also makes me think about Psalm chapter 2, by the way. And I want to go there real quickly. I got time to find it. Psalm chapter 2. I'm still here. Okay. Psalm chapter 2. 25. Psalm chapter 2. Because it talks about Yahweh on his throne. And as we got the countdown going on, this is why are the nations in an uproar, and the people devising a vain thing, and the kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh, against his anointed. Let his terrors fetter apart and cast away. And he who sits in heaven laughs, and Yahweh scoffs at them, and he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury. But as for me, I've installed my king upon Zion, my holy hill. I will surely tell of the decree of Yahweh. He said to me, "Thou art my son; today I've begotten thee." And then it goes on about having this rod of breaking with a rod of iron, and thou shalt shatter them with like earthenware. And therefore, O kings, show discernment, take warning, O judges. Worship Yahweh with reverence. There's a quick rendition of Psalm chapter 2. Check it out for yourself. Thank you for being part of Walking in Spirit of Truth this time around. And until next time, shalom, shalom.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all the other live Lamb show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network. We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Sandi Craig, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.